The signs are ominous. The fear is palpable. The apprehensions are very real. The world is standing on the brink of a possible apocalypse brought by the Russia-Ukraine war. And this is a direct conflict now between Russia and the United States of America. Is the world actually looking at the possibility of the Third World War? Hello and welcome to an India Today special broadcast. Over the course of the next half hour, India Today's team of reporters, Geeta Mohan and I, from Moscow and Warsaw, will get you the latest as the world stares at very dangerous signs ahead.
It's been a month since the world has been plunged into a massive crisis. While a smooth win for Russia seems nearly impossible, there are growing fears that the conflict could engulf first Europe and then the world.
A month of war, wider conflict fears. Russian war machine bogged down. As Ukraine gives a spirited fight back, open nuclear blackmail by Putin. NATO and European Union fear getting sucked in. Does NATO no-fly zone mean World War III? World War III never looked more real. Global doomsday war looms.
Almost 1 month into the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Ukraine hasn't collapsed. Of course, Ukraine's President Zelensky expects the North Atlantic Treaty Organization countries to do more and not remain a silent spectator. NATO countries, of course, have been providing military hardware to Ukraine. But Ukraine not just wants more military hardware, it also wants a peacekeeping force on ground. NATO so far has said a clear no to declaring a no-fly zone over Ukraine, a desperate demand of the president of the country. But will Ukraine now expect the North Atlantic Treaty Organization to provide more than just military hardware? Of course, Germany is providing Strela missiles. NATO countries are providing Stinger missiles, Javelin anti-tank guided missiles, the other anti-tank guided missiles. But a lot more needs to be done. What role will NATO play in the days and months ahead? Let's find out.
The war in Ukraine is now a month old and counting. But not for a moment has this been just Ukraine's fight. From the very beginning of the invasion, it has had all the tremors of the global conflict. Those leading the crisis themselves warn that World War III could be ahead. Russia first triggered the ghost of a global war by placing its nuclear weapons on high alert in February, following the move with a warning that World War III would have to be nuclear and destructive.
Всем понятно, что Третья мировая может быть только ядерной. Но, обращаю ваше внимание,
everybody understands that World War III can only be nuclear. It is in the heads of the Western politicians that nuclear war is always revolving and not in the heads of the
я вас
Russians.
уверяю, что мы не позволим.
That is why I assure you that we will not allow any provocations to force us out of the balance. But if a real war against us starts developing, those who carry out such plans must have a think.
Реальную войну, ну, это, наверное, должны думать об этом те, кто такие планы вынашивает, а они...
Amidst Ukraine's sustained pleas for NATO to impose a no-fly zone over the invaded nation, Russia raised the spectre again, warning that any such move could trigger a Third World War. And that's probably the reason why, despite vehemently condemning Russia, the US or the European Union have rejected Zelensky's demand to declare Ukraine's airspace a no-fly zone.
Хочемо запровадити закриття неба, тому що
We
конкретно
want to close the airspace because our children are being deliberately killed.
Білорусі і
Missiles, bombs, jets are flying from the territory of Belarus and Russia.
і бомбардировщики.
Any move in this direction will be viewed by us as a participation in the armed conflict of whichever side whose territory will pose a threat to our service members. That very second, we will view them as participants of the military conflict, and it would not matter what members they are.
Уже все равно, какими там членами они являются.
Wars were fought in Iraq, Syria, and also between two of the biggest nations, China and India. But never before did the risk of World War III looked as serious as it does now amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine. On a military scale, Russia's Ukraine war is limited. Yet the risk of World War III is bigger than ever and could just be a trigger away. Till now, Europe or America have refrained from sending troops to fight against Russia, limiting their response to sanctions and military aid. So why is the ghost of another world war so strong? World War is the name given to two multilateral wars that were essentially European. The First World War, fought during 1914 to 19, mainly involved Germany, Austria-Hungary and Turkey against the Allies, France, the UK, Soviet Russia, Italy, Japan, and from 1917, the United States. The Second World War, fought between 1939 to 1945, mainly involved Germany, Italy and Japan against France, UK, US and Soviet Russia. As the stakes pile up, as the pressure builds, and as the implications mount for Europe, the Russia-Ukraine war has the potential for a bigger war, both in weaponry and geography. Will NATO be pushed to impose a no-fly zone? And is that the one move separating the world from World War III? Bureau Report, India Today.
In the early hours of February 24th, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced an invasion, what Russia calls special military operations into Ukraine. The month that followed saw more than 10 million people displaced, towns bombarded beyond recognition. And now, as the conflict enters its second month, there are fears that this destruction could continue while there is no negotiated settlement in sight.
I decided to conduct a special military operation. It aims to protect people who have been bullied and subjected to genocide by Kiev regime for 8 years.
It all started with an early morning broadcast that stunned the world. The future of millions of Ukrainians changed with the blink of an eye. Now, a month and counting, Ukraine has survived ruthless bombing, brutal attacks, and endless hellscape. Russian forces are struggling to capture key Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv and Kharkiv. Kyiv still stands firm. Heavily outnumbered and outmuscled, yet Ukraine is giving them a bloody nose.
I thank everyone who acts in support of Ukraine, in support of freedom, but the war continues. The acts of terror against peaceful people go on. 1 month already. That's long. It breaks my hearts of all Ukrainians and every free person on the planet.
The war has spared no one. Toddlers, Kids, youngsters, elderly, all victims. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, over 10 million people have fled their homes, mostly women and children. With each passing hour, Ukraine war is fast becoming the fastest growing humanitarian crisis Europe has seen since the Second World War. Diplomatic efforts are on to secure a ceasefire, and yet reports of civilian deaths in Ukrainian cities continue to make headlines. Once a bustling, lively and colorful country, many Ukrainian cities are becoming ghost towns. Bureau Report, India Today.
Make no mistake, this is Cold War 2.0. Ukraine may just be the excuse, but this is the United States of America and Russia going head for head. The two biggest military powers, the two biggest nuclear powers in the world are facing off. Nuclear forces are being tested. Nuclear forces are carrying out their exercises. What does this mean? Not just for Ukraine or Russia. What does this mean for this region, for Europe, and actually the entire world? There is a clear realignment taking place globally, as our next report tells us more.
Cut forward a few decades, and a very hot war in Ukraine has a cloud of the old Cold War all around it. Sit back while we prove to you that we are in Cold War 2.0. Proof 1. Direct US-Russia tension. The first piece of proof, the war in Ukraine has sparked the most high-level tensions between the US and Russia in decades, with both superpowers reviving historic angst to paint each other as global imperialistic aggressors running roughshod over world peace.
Did you ask me whether I was called? Oh, I think he is a war criminal.
Proof 2. Big global realignment. The second piece of proof is the global realignment of the international order. Hugely reminiscent of Cold War pressures, complex linkages aside, the world stands massed against Russia, its ally China, a neutral India, with the United States making it clear to nations that they are against Russia or with Russia. The crisis in Ukraine is visible, crafting a new world order. Proof 3. Nuke forces on high alert. The move by Putin, explained away as a defensive posture by Moscow, has ratcheted up nuclear tensions to dangerous Cold War levels, forcing other nuclear nations, by most accounts, to keep their nukes dusted and ready too. Proof 4. Biowarfare allegations. The allegations of biological weapons laboratories and experimentation with germ warfare are also typical of the Cold War era crossfire. Russia threw the first punch in the current crisis by accusing the US of maintaining biowarfare facilities on Ukrainian soil. The US hit back, saying Putin intends to use bioweapons of his own, and the allegation is just cover fire for his own insidious intentions. Proof 5. Isolation through airspace. With several nations closing their airspace to Russia, the sense of geographic isolation has heightened dramatically in the first few weeks of the Ukraine invasion. With few flights in and out of Russia, the alienation of a superpower is palpable, and in many ways is even more than how it was during the Cold War. Proof 6. Moscow unplugged from global economy. The crippling sanctions against Russia haven't slowed Putin's military rumble in Ukraine, but Russian citizens are most definitely feeling the heat. A Soviet-era arrogance that Russia can survive without the global economy is also representative of Cold War-era confidence. The suggestion that the world needs Russia more than Russia needs the world. Proof 7. Mass mobilization across Europe. Perhaps the most visible manifestation of a new Cold War, the readiness of militaries in Europe across NATO nations and the move of several other countries like Finland to consider joining NATO, creating a spectre of the Russian menace. The suggestion that it's Ukraine today and the other countries next, painting a scary Cold War scenario that goes just beyond the cold. There's real combat taking place in Ukraine for a whole month and counting. One thing is certain, whenever that battle ends, Cold War 2.0 won't end anytime soon. With Shivarur, Bureau Report, India Today.
Beyond the cruise missiles and non-stop bombardments, it is a clash of personalities that is being played out in the Russia-Ukraine war theatre. It is Russian strongman Vladimir Putin on one side and wartime icon President Zelensky on the other.
One is a strong man. The other has become stronger by the day. The one has at his command one of the most powerful militaries that the world has ever known. The other has become the most powerful symbol of military resistance. One is likened to strong leaders going back over 100 years, whose actions destabilized Mother Russia. The other is also likened to wartime leaders of Europe going back nearly a century. The one is Vladimir Putin, the aggressor. The other is Volodymyr Zelensky, the defender. If only this were a computer game. But it is not, and lives are being lost at every instance. As one man pushes his army to invade, destroy, and kill. And the other man pushes back. Pushes back against the invader. Pushes the conscience of the world to help him keep alive the freedom of choice.
Ми боремося за наші права, свободу, за життя. А зараз ми боремося за виживання. Тому що не хочемо втратити те, що в нас є, те, що наше. I'm addressing the President Biden. You are the leader of the nation, of your great nation. I wish you to be the leader of the world. Being the leader of the world means to be the leader of peace. Поки що не всі помічають, але ви ніби знов за стіною. Так, не берлінською, але посеред Європи, між свободою і неволею. І стіна ця міцніше з кожною бомбою, яка падає на нашу землю, на Україну.
If only this were history from the past. If only this were not terrible history in the making.
Такого единения у нас давно не было.
Vladimir Putin, in the 22nd year of his power, is no longer an individual. He's a system. He's an order.
Правильно, когда поставили жесткий барьер на пути.
He's both an individual and a symbol for all that Russia has come to stand today. 146 million Russians do not matter. What matters is what Vladimir Putin decides. Putin is more than an individual. He has become synecdoche, a minuscule Russian who has made himself represent the whole of it. Vladimir Zelensky, in his third year in office, is no longer the comedian he was. He has grown in importance far beyond the boundaries of his beleaguered country. Zelensky, in his military t-shirt, is a symbol too. Zelensky is resistance, a rallying call for 41 million Ukrainians. Zelensky too is a synecdoche, where the whole of Ukraine is represented in its one single minuscule part.
Nobody expected Ukraine to last 29 days and counting. Ukraine fought back and continues to fight back. There are graveyards of Russian tanks, armored personnel carriers, and even fighter jets and helicopters. Of course, with the weapons and systems provided by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization countries, especially the anti-tank guided missiles, the Javelins, the Stinger surface-to-air missiles, and the Bayraktar unmanned combat aerial vehicles, major technology disruptors that have proven to be a game changer in this battle, at least so far. But the question remains, how long can Ukraine survive in the days and weeks ahead as Russia intensifies its assault on Ukraine?
Civilians training to pick up guns to fight for their country. Fathers and mothers with their teenage children take turns to learn how to operate. While ordinary Ukrainians train and prepare to defend their country, the world has gradually but steadily been helping the defender. Faced with the mighty aggressor, Ukraine looks severely out of favor from a military point of view. Yet a country with just 2 lakh active military personnel has been able to stand up to a behemoth Russian army that has sophisticated weaponry at its command. A large part of that fierce resistance comes from the swift transfer of military equipment by NATO and other allied countries. In a first, the 27-country bloc of the European Union signed off a $551 million package to help arm Ukraine. Germany has rewritten its long-standing policy that barred exporting weapons into war zones. Germany sent 1,000 anti-tank weapons, 500 Stinger anti-craft defense systems to Ukraine. Within days of the invasion, France reportedly promised to send military aid to Ukraine, but there's no publicly disclosed specifics of it. The United Kingdom has so far sent 2,000 short-range and anti-tank missiles, SAXON armored vehicles, and SABRE air defense system with 100 military operators. The US so far has been the largest contributor with 1,400 Stinger anti-aircraft missile systems, 4,600 Javelin anti-tank missiles, 5 Mi-17 helicopters, 3 patrol boats, 4 counter-artillery and counter-drone tracking radars, 2,000 light anti-armor weapons, 300 grenade launchers and ammunition. They've also sent 600 shotguns and 600 machine guns, 5,000 rifles, 1,000 pistols, 25,000 sets of body armor, 25,000 helmets. The US has so far sent nearly 40 million rounds of small arms ammunition, over 1 million grenades, mortar and artillery rounds, along with 70 Humvees and other vehicles, 6,000 at 4 anti-armor systems and 1,000 switchable drones.
I'm grateful to US President Biden for new effective aid for our country. You should understand that I can't reveal all the details of this package of aid and others. This is our defense tactic when the enemy doesn't know what to expect from us.
Justin Trudeau has been the next big military aid contributor in arming Ukraine after Joe Biden. Canada has sent nearly 4,500 M72 rocket launchers, 1,600 fragmentation vests, nearly 7,500 hand grenades. Other than that, it has also contributed $1 million to buy commercial satellite high-resolution and modern imagery, machine guns, pistols and carbines. Canada has sent 1.5 million rounds of ammunition, sniper rifles and various related equipment worth $7.9 million to Ukraine so far. It has also contributed $19.9 million in military aid that could include helmets, body armor, gas masks and night vision gears. From Asia, Japan has sent bulletproof vests and helmets to Ukraine, and South Korea too has contributed to the war effort. The next door neighbor for both Russia and Ukraine, Poland has reportedly contributed tens of thousands of shells and artillery ammunition, anti-aircraft missiles, light mortars and reconnaissance drones. All three Baltic and Scandinavian countries too have contributed with military aid to arm Ukraine, as has other European countries. Australia and New Zealand have come with major military donations for Ukraine. But for now, all this help from around the world has not been able to convince Putin's army to back down. The war continues and destruction abounds.
War and economic prosperity never go hand in hand. No wonder top world economies are feeling the shockwaves. The implications and ramifications of a wider conflict will be felt across the world, and India is no exception.
On February 24th, Russia invaded Ukraine.
This is Mariupol. You hear a series. Hear this sound. Hear this sound. This is Mariupol. This sounds like very intense artillery pounding. This in a way could well be Grad multiple barrel rocket launchers going one after the other. Zoom, 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 zoom.
On March 8th, US President Joe Biden raised the ante by announcing a ban on the import of Russian energy products.
We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine.
Over the days of the war, the price of crude has fluctuated, but it has mainly been going north, adding to India's challenges. And that is because India has to import 80% of its total fuel needs. It is estimated that India buys around 2% of its total crude oil requirements from Russia. The figures for the 10 months from April 2021 to January 2022 indicate that India imported some $2 billion worth of oil from Russia in that period. Now, with Russia facing sanctions and restricted from selling oil to most of the world, India has gone ahead and signed a deal to import 3 million barrels of crude. While this would increase the Russian share in overall imports, the price at which the deal was struck is not yet known. The speculation, however, is that Russia offered what is called a steep discount on the prevailing rates, something which would be beneficial to India under the current circumstances. Nearly a month into the war, and the economic impact of it is being felt all around the world. But of particular concern are the developing economies of Asia, and that includes India. It is not just the problem of crude, but the war is going to have a potentially disastrous impact on other oils as well. In India, the edible oil market, which depends heavily on Russian and Ukrainian imports, has been hit hard. India, incidentally, is the world's largest importer of edible oils. Its imports, mainly from the war zone, account for around 56% of its total demand. sunflower oil makes up 19% of all edible oil imports. Recent figures indicate that about 81% of India's sunflower oil is imported from Ukraine and 12% from Russia. With the threat of supply disruptions, India is expected to see some major hiking of prices of edible oils in the next few weeks, unless, of course, the situation improves. The longer the war drags on, more will be the economic impact. The movement of ships in the Black Sea has been severely hit, and that too has had an effect on India's exports, mainly to the former Soviet republics in the Eurasian region. The ban on Russian banks accessing the SWIFT banking system is also of concern to Indian exporters. Incoming payments of about $500 million from Russia are in limbo, till a rupee-ruble trade arrangement can be worked out between the Indian and Russian governments. Another area that might be impacted in India is the pharmaceutical sector. Big Indian pharma companies have production facilities in Russia and offices in Ukraine. The facilities in the region date back 3 decades, and the duration of the war will decide the future for these facilities and the stocks. Another sector that might take a hit is the automobile sector, globally as well as in India. Rise in oil prices, continued shortage of semiconductors and chips, and other rare earth metals is likely to add to the industry's woes. Russia accounts for 35% of the global production of palladium and 10% of platinum. Both are key inputs in catalytic converters and so plays a role in the automobile supply chain. Ukraine is also home to many companies which manufacture car components for automakers, and some of them have already had to shut factories there. And then there is tea. One of the biggest losers due to the conflict could be India's tea sector, because Russia alone imports almost 13% of India's total tea exports. According to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the global economic fallout of the war in Ukraine is expected to overall negatively impact India's economy. Ironically, it would be a second-hand impact, felt because of the negative impact of the war on the US, the EU, and the Chinese economies. The war in Ukraine and its effect on these big economies, according to the IMF, could dampen external demand for India's exports, while at the same time, supply chain disruptions would negatively impact India's imports. The tandem effects of this will overall hurt the well-being of India's economic future. According to the IMF, there is a great deal of uncertainty around the outlook for India. So the sooner the war ends in Ukraine, the better it will also be for India.
US President Joe Biden is in Brussels. He also heads to Warsaw. This is a visit where military assistance not just to Ukraine but to NATO countries will be on the table, along with humanitarian assistance to Ukraine and to Poland. I will continue to track the story and get you the latest from Warsaw.
Moscow will keep a sharp eye on Biden's next moves with NATO allies. Keep watching India Today for an unparalleled war coverage.